Welcome back. We are the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael,
And I am James.
and today we are going back to season 1 of the Revival series with Boomtown, the 11th episode and second to last story of the season. It was written by Russell T Davies and aired on June 4th, 2005, at least in the UK.
But sadly does not feature any woman pointing at a signpost.
That is true. That RTD trope has not yet been used, but it's coming. This story serves as a bit of a sequel to Aliens of London, World War III. The plot is, as such, stopping off in present-day Cardiff to recharge the TARDIS. The Doctor, Rose, and Jack meet up with Mickey and encounter an old foe in the midst of hatching a scheme that could destroy the entire planet. The old foe in question happens to be Margaret, one of the Slovene individuals from Aliens of London World War III. Apparently, she was able to survive the explosion at the end, and here she is. She is now indeed Mayor of Cardiff. So it's a good election right there, bro.
Well, yeah, I wonder how the election went. So apparently she had been, and I forgot exactly what she was, but she was the one who was a senior member of MI5. That was the body that the Slovene took, who we learn her name. Her name, the Slovene who inhabits Margaret's body, is Blan Fats Passimir de Slovene. Very nice name. As the doctor says, nice to meet you, Blan. But I'm just quickly looking through the TARDIS wiki. I always remember you used to write TARDIS wiki, not the old fandom one. But yeah, so I was always kind of confused personally how she became mayor of Cardiff, because she was seen on TV hanging around with all these people, and I would assume that if she's not prime minister yet, I assume Harry Jones is prime minister now. Kind of has to be. So I would assume she would try to tell the story, and she would have mentioned, "Hey, look out for Margaret," but apparently not. So I've always been kind of confused how she got out of that. But maybe it's literally what she said, that London doesn't care about Cardiff.
And it's probably vice versa. Those in Cardiff probably may not care much about what's going down in London.
I suppose that might be possible, maybe. It seems like I wish there had been some answer. Maybe somewhere else tries to answer it. I don't know.
I mean, I feel like the Walsh have their own problems, but it's just how they be. This episode has long been considered, at least I've long heard it considered, sort of like almost a black sheep of this season. It's certainly somewhat atypical. It's a bit of a slower episode in a way. It's more of like almost a character study. And like the plot says, we have naturally the Doctor and Rose here, which is a Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper. Jack is traveling with them right now, which is fantastic. Naturally, Jack is played by John Barrowman. Mickey's also here visiting up with Rose, in fact, bringing Rose her passport. Mickey, of course, is played by Noel Clarke. Naturally, we have Margaret, well, the skin of Margaret back, and played by Annette Badlin, and she was pretty fun in that first two-parter, so it's great to see her come back here.
Yeah, she even pops up, and this is pretty fun information, she even pops up in a Touchwood audio, which is, because you'll probably throw this on the screen because I like having fun, which was the audio sync in the monthly Touchwood range. And we haven't listened to any of the Touchwood range, but the monthly range tended to focus on a random member of the Touchwood team, not the whole team, just a random member, maybe a couple, and then have a story focus around them. And this one, actually, it's so random, it's Susie, who we see die, and Michael's seen at least the first season of Touchwood, and we see Susie die in the very first episode of Touchwood, but randomly we just get Susie dealing with Margaret Blaine, the mayor of Cardiff. So I don't know, I think that's, and of course it's Big Finish. They use the same voice actor, they use Annette Badland as Margaret. It's just so great to me that they keep using the same actors as often as they can, even for people who only appeared, 3 times in the main series of Doctor Who.
Yeah, it's nice to see them. I guess just reuse some of these people, get their money's worth.
And the cover's pretty good too, but what do you expect from Slovenes? But besides that, yeah, she does get to explore the outer worlds of the expanded universe of Doctor Who.
But yeah, this episode had sort of a I don't want to say negative reputation, but certainly when it comes to this first season, I think it does sort of stand out a bit. And I have to say, I have a bit of a soft spot for it. I guess, had a soft spot for the Unquiet Dad, so maybe it's not a big surprise. But I think there's a lot to actually quite enjoy with this episode. Yeah, it's a slower episode, and I do think I guess, the action-packed ending when the rift breaks open. It's nice on the side note to see the rift in Cardiff, like we saw again in the Unquiet Dad. In fact, those events even brought up to Mickey in this toy. So it's nice. It's almost like a continuation of that too, which is also playful. But I do think it's nice to see a sort of slowest toy. We see some Mickey and Rose material. Apparently, Mickey's been going out with another woman and sort of feels guilty about it because he's actually waiting for Rose if she ever comes back. And there's some good material there. We see the Doctor and Margaret. Oh, you could use her full name, but I'll just call her Margaret.
Her name is Blanc.
Yeah. Well, we see them sort of bonding over the fact that Margaret's going to be executed, which we'll touch on in a little bit. And we see Jack working on the TARDIS, and it's pretty much all Jack does. Jack does have some stuff to do at the beginning, but I mean, with a 43 minutes toy, it's not easy to find things for like our three main cast members to do. I'm not sure what they could have had Jack doing in this time that they had. So I guess hey, having fitted with the TARDIS, I guess it works.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of strange. They characterized Jack in this episode as somebody who's really fascinated in, I would say, alien technology, when he in fact is also an alien. But he's fascinated in technology, and I have to say, I've never gotten that impression of Jack. This is a very, very early appearance of Jack, I suppose. And perhaps Russell didn't quite know what he wanted to do with him. But I've seen all of Torchwood. I don't think it's pointless to say. I never quite saw him as somebody really fascinated in seeing technology. That's just not who he is. That's not really his character. So I thought that was kind of strange. Plus, the outfit he was wearing in this episode was not the normal things that we see him wear outside of Torchwood and what he wore in his first appearance. The whole long trenchcoat thingy. He was wearing something much different in this one, and that just, it didn't throw me off, but it just looks strange. And this is, of course, besides the final two parts of the season, the only episode that stars Jack as a normal companion alongside Rose, and it barely even feels like it, because Mickey's also here in a very huge role for him, and actually a very good role as well. I think Mickey might be, I mean, between him and the actress who played Blanc, might have been the second best role in the episode, because Noel Clarke, as horrible as a human being as he may be, he did good work in acting in this episode. He felt genuine, he felt real. You could feel the emotional problems he's having. At least for me, you could really see where he was coming from. Even Rose, basically, at the end, not he didn't tell him, but she basically said, yeah, he was right. And I don't know, I thought he had put in a very strong performance in this episode.
Yeah, I really do think that's where this episode sort of shines. I think the conversations with Margaret and the Doctor, pretty much after the Doctor and company capture Margaret, she's been building a nuclear power plant that's sort of designed to fail, and cast is sort of like almost I forget how to describe it. It's like a wave of distraction that's going to allow her to sort of, she has like this, what amounts to pretty much like an intergalactic surfboard type thing, and surfs up, brah. So,
surfs up, boys.
So she has this surfboard that she can sort of ride the waves with the distraction with, and the Doctor and company capture her. She sort of spoils the fun they had by saying, oh, hey, she's going to be executed when she gets back to her home planet. The family Slitheen were tried in absence and found guilty. So if she goes back to her home planet, according to her, she'll be executed. Who's to say how long ago that decision, that trial was made? Maybe they've changed leadership since then. I mean, you don't really know. I have no idea how long they've been gone. But, you know, hey, I guess better safe than sorry. I don't really want to be boiled in acid and have my skin stripped away. So I get it.
Well, actually, it's funny because during that part of the episode, they actually reminded me a lot of Planet of Fire, which my brother and I have watched relatively recently compared to a lot of classic Who. And in that one, what was it? Torlog didn't want to go back to his home planet because his family was tried after a new political regime came in. But then,
it actually was quite a bit similar, wasn't it?
Then I think he met somebody else from the planet who said something along the lines of, "Oh, your family's been pardoned." Well, I want to know what they were doing first. Like, was it a legitimate reason for them to be tried, or was it illegitimate, or is it a fascist government? I want to know more specifics about the politics. But sadly, they didn't get into that there, and they didn't really talk about the hair, because here it's more the Slytherins are just a criminal family, which still sounds bad because no family is inherently criminal. It's not like it's within their genes. It's just how they grew up and were raised. But as Margaret O'Blan says in this episode, according to her, she had no choice. She was made to do her first kill at 13 or so. And that very well could be true, I don't know. But I think there's a very strong part. I mean, again, the two strongest parts of this episode, really the episode's almost not worth talking about in terms of anything else. Because in essence, what this was a battle episode, which is an episode that uses a small location, tries not to use all that much money because it's planted somewhere else. Kind of like the famous episode of Breaking Bad, the episode, was it called Fly?
Yeah, I believe Fly, which I forget what it might have been season 4, maybe.
I thought Fly was season 3.
It's the same idea, but yeah, that's probably one of the most famous examples of a battle episode, which I think is a good comparison.
Yeah, and this just feels so much like it. We have Cardiff, which you've already seen. Granted, the Cardiff we saw was in the 1800s with the Gauth. And remember, you have to pity the Gauth. They say so. But all it is them in Cardiff. There's not many special effects. A laser shoots out of the TARDIS. We see the light of the heart of the TARDIS. And we see these quasi-hideous CGI cracks in the pavement. And of course the Slytherin costume. But really, one, we only see that whole thing once. For the rest of the episode, the most we ever see is an arm. And two, again, they just had it lying around. It's not like that cost any more money. I guess it was CGI, but still. It's not like they had to spend too much on that. This just feels like a battle episode, and it makes sense with what Michael was saying, because when you have a battle episode, what matters is character. Because most good battle episodes are put in a place where you've met your characters by now, and you just want to see them together. And this episode provided a lot of that. We saw the Doctor, Mickey, Rose, and Jack just having fun eating lunch. I have seen a scene of the 15th Doctor and Ruby eating lunch, just talking.
To be fair, with only 8 episodes, it's not like they had that much time to do it. But I do agree, that type of almost sort of family feeling between the companion and Doctor, it largely doesn't feel like they use that much anymore.
Well, yeah, we don't need to talk about the newest season, but yes, I would agree to that. I don't know, it's just a nice feeling. You can tell that Mickey feels out of the loop, which makes sense. And Jack and Rose are just so excited to be along with the Doctor. The enthusiasm is kind of strange. They seem like really into it. Maybe the Doctor should have started calling them fam. But I don't know, I thought even with Mickey feeling a bit out of the loop with the 4 of them, it still felt really nice to see them together. And it looked like they were genuinely enjoying a good time together. So it's just kind of nice to see it on that front. But Mickey's strongest scenes were basically just with Rose. Because as Michael said, Mickey started seeing another woman. Do you remember what her name was?
I don't.
Oh, I think it might have been Trisha.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Trisha Delaney sounds very close. And I like it because he lets Rose know after Rose is doing something you should never do, and just talking about an adventure with the Doctor, which I actually think is from a book that Rose was in. I don't know about that for sure, but I think I read that it was. But either way, she's just talking about an adventure with the Doctor. And Mickey's just walking beside her, not saying anything because he wants to spend time with her. He doesn't want the Doctor involved in this. And then he's like, "Oh, I'm going out with Trisha Delaney." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And then we next cut back to them. We see that they're just walking along. And he suggests, "Hey, maybe we should find a hotel for the night," because he was hoping maybe they could spend a night together. And she's like, "Oh, I don't know, what would Trisha think?" He's like, "Oh, yeah, that's fair." And then it's quiet for a few seconds. And then Rose is out of nowhere. She goes from 0 to 10. But you don't even like Trisha Delaney. And it's absolutely hilarious. I mean, it's not actually hilarious that Rose doesn't comprehend Ricky's emotions. But it's hilarious how completely out of the loop she was. She really had no consideration for what Mickey was going through. And it's strange because on the whole, Rose is empathetic to the people she's met on her journeys. But when it comes to Mickey, she just has no clue what he has experienced since the doctors come into their life. Keep in mind, Ricky was considered a murderer for a year, basically, because Rose had disappeared, and then they got back a year late because the doctor made a mistake. So he's going through a lot.
And I do think that Rose does sort of realize, like, especially when Mickey has a really good lines, like, hey, what am I supposed to do? Am I just supposed to wait for Ave? Because I will. Like, he's literally asking what he's supposed to do. And it's a really good question. And I think Rose, I think it's around that time that something went down. Rose may not have been even able to answer. But I don't know if she would have been able to answer anyway.
Yeah, no, she was really saved by the explosion there. Because there was absolutely nothing she could have said that would have been a legitimate answer to the pain, to the actual pain that we saw he was going through. Because literally, he's crying on that scene. Again, it's very strong. And if you know about Noel Clarke as an actor and the things he was, I guess we have to say, accused of, then you might not want to give credit where credit is due. But the acting is strong during that scene.
Yeah, and while that's going on, and I sort of almost, you could argue, sub up a moment between Rose and Megan. I don't mean it negatively, but that's sort of how it feels. The doctor is taking Margaret out to a little restaurant that she has come to enjoy, sort of like a last wish type thing, given that she's going to be executed when she gets back to her home world. And if you're wondering, hey, why can't they just go now? Well, like I said earlier, the TARDIS is recharging, which I feel like we don't see very often, but who's to say? And they can't really do anything until, like, I think the morning. So they're sort of stuck here for a night. Which sort of, again, leads to, I don't know, it's a very interesting feel for the story. But the doctor takes Margaret out to eat. And they sort of have a conversation, well, like James alluded to, about her upbringing, about almost sort of like the culture. Do we know what this piece is called?
Probably just a Roxa. I hate this word. But Rose was so excited when she got it right in this episode. That's actually kind of hilarious. But a Roxacorphalopatorian. And remember the sister planet's Clam.
Yeah, so whatever that species is technically called. So she's sort of almost explaining her upbringing and backstory. And the doctor is sort of in a position where not only does he have to, I guess, take action, but he has to see the consequences in a way. And she makes a very good point. I think the line is, I bet you're always the first to leave. And given everything we know from the doctor, how even in, we discussed the wheel of ice, the doctor just leaves after that whole incident and just leaves them to their own devices. I mean, the doctor always does that.
You don't even need to go. You don't even need to go to the wheel of ice. Look at, literally, that's a plot point in the long game. He just left after dismantling what, yes, it was a news organization that was corrupting the news. I get that. But he still just left. He didn't explain anything. He didn't put out a press conference explaining what happened. He just left. And we see what happened then. Granted, this is something the doctor's done probably for centuries, if not over 1,000 years. I know this doctor says he's only 900. I question that. And I know that's how he operates, but much like how going to Matt Smith, that's not how he travels. He doesn't travel in a safe way, where he actually looks at what planets he might be going to. He just travels. The doctor also just doesn't care about what happens after he leaves. I mean, I'm sure he would say he cares, but he seems to rarely stick around to make sure things are okay. And maybe he would think that's using too much power, which honestly sounds like he's a liberal at that point. But I don't know, it's just, it doesn't seem smart to me. And for all the negative things about, of course, Blanc or Margaret in this episode, that was a very astute observation on her part. She's not wrong in the slightest. I thought that was a very strong line from her. Actually, all the scenes between the Doctor and Blanc were very strong on the whole. Some of the effects while she was trying to assassinate him might not have been as great, but the actual conversations were good.
Yeah, and again, I think that's one of the places where this episode really works. And Margaret brings up that she believes that, she says she believes she can change. Because earlier in the episode, Margaret was about to kill, I think, some reporter who was sort of digging into the whole nuclear power plant thing. But then, after a brief discussion, she finds out that she's not only going to be getting married, but she's also pregnant. I think she's like 3 months pregnant or so. And instead of killing her like Margaret's planning to, she sort of almost reminisces about her own family. And she sort of just takes the time, just lets her be. And it's I think, a very good scene. I mean, well, let me phrase, I can't help but feel bad for Margaret. But she's like, oh, I once had a pretty sizable family. But now they're gone. It's only me. I mean, it's a pretty good, I would argue, pretty good emotional moment.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very strong emotional moment too. And I just wish they had stuck with that. Because, of course, if you've seen the episode, at the end, turns out the entire thing on Margaret's end was a plot to try to get off the planet. And so she was faking most of her emotions in her conversations with the Doctor. At least it seemed to be the case if she always had a plot. Now, during that scene, she wasn't faking it, but I think it would have been stronger if she did have a plot in this episode, and it literally was just about, can the Doctor, or is it morally right for the Doctor to just take her to a planet when he knows that she's going to get executed pretty brutally for this wall? Because the Doctor says, hey, I don't make the rules, which is very strange to hear coming from the Doctor. It's not something you'd usually expect the Doctor to say. I do think the episode would have been stronger if they did use her as an antagonistic force, and they more just really trying to just tell a story. Is it right or is it wrong? What should the Doctor do? What would Rose want the Doctor to do? What does Mickey think? What does Jack think? This could have been a really interesting episode if they didn't have it end up with her having a plan to try to explore the Earth again.
Yeah, and this ties into that. But the whole, like, oh, I don't even know what they call it. It's probably a trip word. Like, 25th hour action subplot where the TARDIS is becoming unstable. And there's a reason for it. It ties in with the intergalactic surfboard that we mentioned earlier. But it just, in the final 10 minutes, it seems like the TARDIS is becoming unstable. There's a lot of energy and almost like an earthquake type thing going on in Cardiff. And it just seems like sort of unnecessary. Like James said, if they had focused on the moral questions here, that'd be a lot more interesting than some type of forced action sequence and Margaret telling that, oh, I've been lying this whole time. She wasn't lying in the bathroom. She generally seemed like, hey, I was going to kill this woman, now I'm not. So she wasn't lying. But maybe if she was given like a couple more weeks, she would have maybe been strong enough to think, hey, maybe I actually can change. It's just sort of awkward, really. But yeah, I do think the finale sort of does. I don't want to say it ruins the episode because it doesn't, but it certainly sort of falls flat compared to the rest of what's going on.
Yeah, for me, it's certainly, if we had to rank these episodes, I think the ending would bring it down a point. Just because the concept was, they literally had it right there. They didn't have to end it the way they did. But maybe they figured, oh, younger kids would be bored. If it was literally just a episode with conversation about morality. I mean, we see episodes actually like this in Torchwood. In season 1, there was, I believe it's called Out of Time, where there's no huge threat they're dealing with. It's just conversations. It's helping people try to get on with their lives after something to them happened that was traumatic. And those episodes can be really good. I think Out of Time is a really good episode, but this could have been that, and it just wasn't. So yeah, I do think the ending does devalue the episode as a whole, but it doesn't make the stuff that came previously bad. It was still pretty good out of the conversations between Mickey and Rose and between the Doctor and Margaret, especially when the Doctor says, after Margaret tries to say, oh, well, I didn't kill the reporter, that means I can change. And the Doctor's like, no, that's not what it means at all. I believe that it happened, but that's how mass murderers go on with their life.
Yeah, I think that it's like you let one get away and that's how you justify it.
Like, oh, the wind was going in the right direction. One day I decided to be kind. And I'm sure that Margaret thought she had a point. Maybe. But the Doctor, he's very convincing. I don't know, like, on most of those arguments during the conversations, it's funny, but I kind of side with Margaret. But on that point, the Doctor is a very good convincer. The writing for that scene in particular was very good to me. I really liked that part.
Yeah, and I guess you could argue that when it comes to the ending of this episode, it does sort of introduce the heart of the TARDIS, which becomes sort of a plot point with this last story in this season. So I mean, it's not like this. It's not like the whole sequence is pointless. But I don't know. It probably could have been a better way to set that up than what they went with. And I have no idea, actually. I'm assuming that's a commonly held opinion, but I really don't know. I mean, when's the last time you saw anyone giving a reaction to this one?
I said people react to Boomtown just yesterday. They were Slovene.
I must have missed it. But yeah, I have to imagine it's not an uncommon thought. Because generally, I do think the episode's decently solid, but the ending just doesn't completely like nail the landing. Another thing this episode set up was the bad wolf thing. Well, I guess it did set up the bad wolf thing, but the Doctor seems to have actually noticed it now because the name of the project was Welsh for bad wolf. I'm not going to pretend to pronounce Welsh, but it was Welsh for bad wolf. The Doctor notices it and he gives like this sort of speech. Oh, it's like water been following us throughout time and space. Because they've also experienced bad wolf throughout. I mean, Rose heard Gwyneth say it back in the Unquiet Dad.
Yeah, this was in fact the Dad and Babel episode where they realize the plot thread of the season.
Yeah, that's actually good. That's another good example, actually. And the Doctor gives this sort of speech, and then Rose is like, "But what's it mean?" Like, and the Doctor's like, "Oh, it doesn't matter." And I imagine he's thinking about it in the back of his head, but he has other things to concern himself with. And naturally, this is the last episode before the two-part season finale, which is what? Bad Wolf and Parting of the Ways.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's the order those episodes go in.
So it's nice to see another last reference to that before I guess the main Bad Wolf quote-unquote stuff kicks off. And speaking more on a lore basis, there is a scene early on once they land in Cardiff, which actually has a funny line in it. But Mickey's sort of been introduced to Jack and company, because Mickey doesn't know Jack naturally. This is only Jack's, well, from what we see, first adventure with the Doctor. But they've gone on. I mean, Jack, Rose, and the Doctor seem all very friendly with each other. So I'm not sure how long they've been traveling, but they've been traveling for a while.
Yeah, to put this in perspective, we aren't talking about the timeline yet, and it's nice to talk about that again. But the TARDIS Wiki timeline for the Ninth Doctor places around 2 books on the Ninth Doctor comic series from, I believe, Titan, in between the Doctor Dances and Boomtown. So depending on how you want to count a comic series as advancers, I would say 4 or 5 advancers, at least that we see on screen in one way or the other. But yeah, the 2 books I believe are the Deviants Train and Only Human. And like I said, a miniseries with the Ninth Doctor by Titan, and then the 4 Ninth Doctor series. And then 1 audio, but we'll talk about that in a second. And I'm not sure how much the Doctor's involved with that. But really, even throwing all that in, it's still not much, but it's, we even hear in this story Jack telling Mickey about one of his adventures with the 3 of them. And it's one of those awkward things where Mickey doesn't get the joke that makes all of them laugh. And it's just, you kind of feel a little bad for him during that scene.
Yeah, and it's during that conversation when it comes up like, hey, why is the TARDIS a police box? Oh, more probably the question's like, what the fuck's a police box, bruh? And the Doctor goes on to explain the chameleon circuit, how it gets talked like this. Mickey and Rose are like, hey, these things actually existed. And so the Doctor sort of explains the function of a police box. And I forget the exact line, but Mickey's like, well, why does anyone notice it? And the Doctor's like, you know what? You put this blue box in front of all these humans. No one cares. They just walk by it. They never notice. Which I think is funny. And I mean, it's pretty much the philosophy the Doctor follows all the time. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting that's even mentioned the perception filter, because that's only first mentioned at the end of season 3, if I'm not mistaken. But he's basically spelling out, yeah, that's what happens. And I think he throws in because humans are stupid apes. But really, it works for our species on the whole.
Yeah, but like James alluded to, we haven't been able to do the timeline placement for a while because it's so pointless to do with modern episodes. So, James, I think you have some timeline stuff for us?
Indeed, I do. As listeners know, the TARDIS Wiki has a personal timeline for each Doctor, including the extensive extended media, ranging from the comic books, comic strips, Big Finish and BBC audio, the multiple book ranges, and everything in between. Doctor Who canon is a jumbled mess and has been forever, so it's just fun to see where the stories we're discussing fit into the universe as a whole, as continuity in the narrative timeline has always been of interest to me personally. And like Michael said, it's been a while since we've done this because we can't really do this with episodes that are new and coming out. But since the current season is over, we'll be able to do more of these now. And it'll be fun to get back into this. Right before Boomtown, there was a cameo appearance by the Dr. Jack and Rose in the audio R&J, which was the third story in The Lives of Captain Jack Volume 3, a Big Finish audio range, of course, from March 25th, 2020. And I think, like I said, they just saw in a small cameo. I think there's some assassination attempt. Jack from the future stops it. I believe this is among the last things that John Barrowman was able to record for Big Finish before he was kind of blacklisted. Either the last thing or the second to last thing, because 2020 is about when that happened. So, hey, when we get back to listening to audios, Michael, we at least have the lives of Captain Jack to look forward to. There were 3 of them.
Boy, oh boy, will that not take a long time to get to.
Yeah, it'll take forever, but it'll be interesting to see Captain Jack interact with River Song. So, I suppose that has that going for it. And immediately after Boomtown, we have a BBC New Series Adventure book, The Stealers of Dreams. Again, I know I've already said it, but I find it fascinating that Jack Harkness actually showed up in some NuWho books as a main companion. I find it very interesting. But this book, published in September 8th, 2005, was written by Steve Lyons, who is a longtime writer for NuWho fiction. Honestly, once you start looking into NuWho fiction, some names will really pop up to you, and you start seeing them everywhere. Like, how many times have you seen Simon Guerrier being the author of something? And I'm mispronouncing that horribly, but he's very prolific in NuWho fiction. And in this book, I have it rather, but it looks like it's a normal Doctor Who adventure. It's a pity that the BBC New Series Adventure books didn't keep the quasi more adult-oriented story riding direction the other series previously had. But it's fine. I guess they think, oh, it's for kids, so we'll make it be less literary, which I think is a fair thing to say about some of the other earlier ones. But it's a pity that Jack never made the covers for any of these books. All of these covers just have the 9th Doctor and Rose. But nonetheless, it's nice to see that Jack did pop up in around 3 or 4 books. And I think that would be really fascinating to read them as an actual TARDIS team. Because this episode, there's many good things as they were about it. They don't really quite feel like a TARDIS team to me. Again, just because Mickey's there, and it kind of throws off the... Not that Mickey being there is bad, but it throws off what you would think the normal feel is like as a team. I think, even though he had just appeared, in fact, I think we get a pretty good example of how the team would work in this upcoming last 2 part of the season as well.
Yeah, and I think James has mentioned this plenty of times before, so have I. But I do wish we had more material with both Rose and Jack traveling with the Doctor, because I think it's such a fun team dynamic. And I think this episode sort of shows so that can be like a naturally, the next 2 parts shows a bit where that could be like 2. So I think it's such a fun dynamic, and it's really nice that there are books and audios that touch on this too.
And comic books even.
Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about the comic books. I mean, there's obviously so much media, and it's nice that it's not forgotten, even though, like with the TV show, there's such a small amount of time. But yeah, I generally think Boomtown is a pretty decent story. Like I said before, the ending brings it down a bit, but it's a pretty fun ride for most of it. Some good emotional material between both Rose and Mickey, and then the Doctor and Blanche/Margaret. So I really think there's a decent amount of things here that are worth seeing. It's probably not untrue to call this like sort of a black sheep of this season, just because it does feel a bit tonally different. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, and certainly I've always had a soft spot for it, like I said. So that's, I guess, my takeaway.
Yeah, I've said before, I think in the Unquiet Dad episode at least, and I know for a certainty in Father's Day, some episodes of the first couple of seasons feel just odd to me, and this is one of those ones that feels odd. And I know that's not very descriptive, and I apologize for that, but they just have a different feeling to them for me. And I think part of it is this one being a battle episode, in all intents and purposes. And I think it certainly stands out if you look at the season as a whole, because I don't think many of the other episodes feel quite like this one. And it's also in quite a strange place, because right before this we had a 2-parter that introduced Jack Harkness. That was a very horror-filled 2-parter, very atmospheric, very... Well, I mean, this one's not badly written, but I would say the last 2 parters are very well written. And right after this is the season finale, where all types of things happen. And so this is kind of just in this part that was never going to do any story any favors, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just the placement of the story makes it just an awkward story to, I guess, have to deal with. So yeah, like James said, this follows a two-parter that leads into a two-parter, and then this sort of just gets stuck in the middle. It's just awkward.
It is, and I do wonder exactly what type of episode could have fit in here without it feeling awkward. All I know is this one really does feel awkward. And again, it's not bad at all because the emotional parts with Mickey kind of had to happen. I'm happy they did happen because we needed that quasi closure that we get. Because we not see Mickey. Oh gosh, we not see Mickey next episode too. I was forgetting that for a second, and I actually thought we had not seen Mickey in the one that reintroduced Sarah Jane. But no, we see him next episode. So, but either way, we had to have these moments. But it still doesn't make the episode feel any less odd. And like I said, I think the episode would have done better without Bland being an antagonistic force, and just the Doctor dealing with the morality of whether he should bring her for an execution or not. But either way, as written, I think the episode is fine. I think if you're going to watch this season, it'll probably stand out to you in one way or another. This certainly isn't anyone's fair horror Love and Monsters. I've never seen it compared to those. But it really does seem kind of middling if you take the season as a whole. But when it comes to the emotional aspects, maybe it's in the top 3. That's very possible. Throw this with Dalek and Father's Day. Maybe those are the top 3 emotional episodes. I'm not sure. I haven't quite looked at it in that context before, but it's possible. But either way, there's certainly a lot of gold in this episode, and if nothing else, we get to see a Slitheen. What more could we want?
I think that sums it up beautifully. But yeah, naturally, that's just our thoughts on this one. If you have any thoughts on Boomtown, you can always let us know either down below here on YouTube or over on X/Twitter. And naturally, you can follow us at Brothers Mahoney if you are so inclined. And next up, we have something sort of exciting, at least exciting in my opinion, certainly different. We are talking about the 1996 Doctor Who movie with Paul McGann. And until Night of the Doctor, one of the few times we actually saw Paul McGann in person as a Doctor. So it's a movie, I think, what we've only seen once.
I think it was only once, and my recollection is that it felt very, very strange, but I suppose that's to be expected.
Yeah, so I remember bits and pieces. It seemed interesting. I'll just leave it at that. I am interested in seeing it again, though, especially given that Paul McGann's appeared more times recently in like Modern Who. So it'd be interesting to go back and see how he did in his first time in the role. But yeah, next up is the 1996 Doctor Who movie. But until then, we have been the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I've been James.
And we hope you have a pleasant night.
And thank you for listening.
See, it's a nice ending.
Go Slitheen.